Best for Britain's MRP poll of more than 15,000 people undertaken by Survation found that an average of 49.2% of respondents want to see a closer EU-UK relationship compared to current arrangements, which have increased costly red tape for businesses, made travel more difficult and expensive, removed opportunities particularly for young people, and badly damaged the UK economy and public finances. The number of people who want closer EU-UK ties is more than 3 times the number who want to see greater distance with just 14%, and double the number who want to keep the status quo with 24%. Support for rapprochement with Europe was the most popular option in all nations and in regions and constituencies in Britain, with greatest support in Scotland with 56%. Even in the constituency of Boston and Skegness, where 74.9% of voters backed leave in the 2016 referendum, a closer relationship is the most popular option. Among undecided voters across Britain, support for closer ties was similarly strong compared to those who want to see greater distance, with there's not much there. Only for people who said they were planning to vote for Reform UK, a mere 8.5% of the electorate, was greater distance the most popular option, with even Tory voters seeing more sense in a closer relationship than greater distance. Unsurprisingly, among voters of all the other major UK political parties, there was a strong majority in favour of closer EU-UK ties, ranging from 62% at Labour to 73% at the SNP. In a blow to the UK's leading Brexit-backing news outlets, closer EU-UK ties is also the most popular option amongst readers of the Daily Mail, The Sun and the Daily Telegraph, which is funny. The findings have been published on Europe Day, when the European Union celebrates the achievements of unity and long-term peace. Best for Britain is advocating 114 evidence-based recommendations to improve the Brexit deal, benefit Britain and improve the EU-UK relationship, including a reciprocal youth mobility scheme and beneficial regulatory alignment to protect high standards in the UK. Naomi Smith, the chief executive of Best for Britain, said, 8 years since the referendum and 3 years since Boris Johnson's botched deal came into effect, no serious person argues that Brexit has been good for the UK, with fewer opportunities and increased costs for consumers and businesses. A close EU-UK relationship is not only possible, it is essential to reverse some of the damage that has been done and put Britain on the path to a better future. Voters want it, businesses need it, and the next government must deliver it, she said. And Labour may not have healed the electoral wounds of Brexit as much as its breakthrough in a string of leave voting areas at the local elections appears to show. That's a new analysis by leading elections expert Sir John Curtis suggesting. Yet experts also suggest Labour may not actually need to prove its Brexit credentials as much as once thought, with Brexit support and its salience waning, and many voters unaware or unsupportive of its stance, but backing it anyway. Labour's electoral successes recently included regaining Hartlepool Council, that's a former party stronghold, where it suffered a painful by-election defeat in 2021. And that shock Tory victory in 2021 had been attributed by then Prime Minister Boris Johnson to the Tory pledge to get Brexit done in a town that had voted almost 70% to leave the EU in 2016. Yet 3 years later, Labour won political control not only in Hartlepool but also in a number of heavily leave voting areas where they had underperformed for a long time, as the party National Executive Committee member Luke Akehurst noted in a recent piece. It won control too in Thurrock, in Cannock Chase, in Hyndburn, in Redditch, and first ever wins in traditionally Tory Rushmore and Ayr. And meanwhile, Labour made gains in leave voting North East Lincolnshire and Peterborough as well. Analysis for Sky News found that in wards where more than 55% of people voted leave, the Labour vote increased by almost 10 points since 2021. The results are likely to be seen by many as a vindication of Labour's efforts to reconnect with Leave voters under Keir Starmer following setbacks in the Red Wall in 2019 and Hartlepool 2 years later, from ruling out rejoining the EU or the single market to pledging to end immigration dependency. Sky News suggested that overall the results show a Brexit shift. Two of Britain's leading electoral analysts, that's Colin Rallings and Michael Thresher, wrote in the Sunday Times that electoral breakthroughs in such heavily Leave voting areas showed many of Labour's problems in the Red Wall appear to have dissipated. And Luke Trill, director of More in Common, said Labour were making the biggest gains in the places where they struggled the most at the last general election, which he said gave the party the opportunity to run the board much more. The reality appears more complicated than voters now trusting and backing Labour on Brexit, however. Psephologist Sir John Curtis noted in a recent piece of analysis of Redfield and Wilton polling for UK in a Changing Europe that fewer than 1 in 5 voters knows that Labour has accepted Brexit. Twice as many say they think the party wants to rejoin as say it wants to stay out, whether they themselves are pro or anti-Brexit, and the rest either say Labour is unclear or are unsure of Labour's stance. Curtis said this cannot be regarded as a success. He says, it seems that many voters are not clear where Labour stands on Brexit. Well, I'm not even. Crucially, among voters who want to stay outside of the EU, those who think Labour agrees with them are 4 times more likely to support the party than those who think it wants to rejoin. And meanwhile, Brexiteers who think Labour does not have a clear policy on the issue are 19 points less likely than rejoiners to say that they will vote for the party. Some on the left might worry that such negative or unclear perceptions of its stance could leave Labour vulnerable if the Tories or the Reform or right-wing press ramped up efforts to portray Labour as a party seeking to reverse Brexit. Uncertainty over Labour's stance is widely seen to have damaged its fortunes in 2019. Yet such perceptions do not in fact seem to be costing Labour anywhere near as much overall support as many would have once assumed. One factor could be the shrinking numbers of Leave supporters. While 52% voted Leave in 2016, the polls are only looking at the views of the 41% that would do so now. That shrinks further to 38% when don't knows are included. And the group who wants to rejoin is not only much larger, but also significantly more pro-Labour. Rejoiners are actually twice as likely to believe Labour wants to rejoin. And Curtis said voters' lack of clarity overall perhaps may be regarded as a signal of success by a party that has wanted to downplay the issue. Party support is remarkably high among pro-EU voters who think Labour shares their stance at 61%. Yet it is also very high even among pro-EU voters who know Labour plans to stay out at 48% and those who think it has no clear policy at 44%. That apparent disregard of Labour's stance by rejoiners that helps explain why, despite then party's official stance on Brexit, and Labour finds itself still being backed by a heavily pro-EU set of voters, as Curtis said. And a further factor could be that while Labour support is lower among Leave voters overall, its Brexit stance does appear to have cut through those Leavers that currently say they will vote for the party. And while the public are generally far more likely to see Labour as a rejoin party, Labour's current Leave backing supporters are far more likely to see it as the opposite. Such a strong Labour showing among voters with such varied beliefs could also simply show Brexit's declining significance for how people vote. Christabel Cooper, the director of the research at the Starmer think tank Labour Together, told that Brexit and Britain's relationship with the EU had lost salience with voters since the last general election. All the research we have done, unless you deliberately prompt Brexit, well, people don't talk about it, they say. The idea that driving any behavior ahead of the election, I find that very hard to believe, he said. And she added that the 2019 result was actually quite misunderstood. People, certainly on the Conservative side, wanted to believe that a bunch of former Labour voters had irreversibly switched to the Tories on the basis of a socially liberal or conservative axis. Now that the economy is in a pretty dire state and the Conservatives are in complete chaos, it's not surprising that they are swinging back to Labour. And as a result, she suggested Labour's position on Europe is unlikely to leave it vulnerable at the election. Yet Cooper suggested that while the Tories cannot bank on these voters' support in 2024, neither can Labour bank on having won them back for good either. What really happened in 2019 was that a group of voters turned from solid Labour voters into swing voters, which any party needs to keep fighting hard for in the future. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.